Okay, we all know about the dominance of Facebook and Google. We also know that there are media properties at least as large, if not larger, in China, enormous market, and also very innovative in terms of media and digital innovation. To tell us more about that, please welcome the co-founder of Hotnest in China, Fabian von Heimburg.
你好，你好，大家好。我今天不会讲中文，但是还要跟你们分享一下。I'm just kidding. I'm not gonna speak Chinese today, but that's kind of also the main issue that in China communication is difficult. People, let me just get the clicker. People kind of don't understand the culture, they don't understand the language. That's also kind of what happened to me when I first came to China. I didn't understand anything about the market. I was afraid about Chinese companies. I thought they were mostly copycat companies. And there are just several issues, and I feel like many people feel that way. So today something I want to talk about is why people should be looking to China, at least equally as they should be looking to the US to understand innovation in the digital space. So I quickly want to ask, who here thinks that China is an innovative country? Raise your hand, please. Oh, so I probably don't even need to give this talk anymore. Because something that I get from a lot of people is that China is still a copycat market, and that's kind of the view that has been pervasive for the last couple of decades, and this is changing quickly. So just some numbers, I guess for people who are more familiar with China, those numbers won't shock you, but most of the consumption behavior in the future will come from China. So China will have 22% of the worldwide middle class by 2030. They now have 750 million people online, and they will have another 500 million people online by 2030. And also by 2030, China will roughly have 800 million people in the middle class, which would just make the Chinese middle class the world's third largest country. And what are these numbers supposed to say? Well, two things, or why are these numbers relevant for everybody? I guess if you look at China will come to you, kind of that's one of the key takeaways. China will come to you no matter if you like it or not. Because if you look at these numbers, they also show that most of the user behavior and most of the consumption habits will be driven from China and Asia. Therefore, products will adapt, and they will more and more be similar to what Chinese or Asian consumers like. Another one is that China has still huge growth potential. So it's actually just at the very beginning of its potential, or at least in the middle, right? So the whole internet sector could still double, triple, or quadruple, depending on how the country develops. And I guess the predominant view, not in this room, but something I see, especially with old industry, is that China is a copycat market. So that basically all the big Chinese companies just copy what's going on in the West. And that's also in the digital space. So if you look at this chart, you see what are the top apps or top web companies in most markets in the world, and you will see something striking that is actually very different, very similar in every country. The only difference is China. There are also a couple of other countries. If you look at Japan or Korea, there will also be different apps. And these products are fundamentally different. So a lot of people say, well, Alibaba is just the same thing as Amazon, or Weibo is just the same thing as Twitter, or WeChat the same as WhatsApp. But that's the same as saying Alta Vista is the same as Google, or MySpace is the same as Facebook. These companies are fundamentally different from the business model perspective, from what they offer users, and from many other aspects as well. So if you really understand them deeply, you will actually see that China is one of the few markets that's different from the rest of the world, and that's not just because of government regulation or these things, but it's also because of very different user behavior and a unique ecosystem. So I hope I can change your view to look at China more as an innovative market instead of saying, okay, it's just a copycat market. So China is actually already the leading innovator in many areas. Many people don't know this. It might be surprising that China is in many areas already ahead of the world. I just picked some random ones which seemed interesting. For example, one is artificial intelligence. China is leading artificial intelligence research. if you think about where the true innovation from, or not innovation, but where the true progress from artificial intelligence comes from, it's mostly research. So it's from universities and government funds. And China, for the last 3 years, has been the leading AI research country. And it's so influential that, in fact, the Artificial Intelligence Summit had to be moved because the initial date was on Chinese New Year, and 50% of people wouldn't show up. So they had to move the Artificial Intelligence Summit. Another area is fintech and mobile payments. So if you look at Ant Financial, which is just one of the billion-dollar fintech financial companies. This one is the financial arm from Alibaba. It's already worth $60 billion, which is as much as one of the world's largest banks, UBS. And this is just one of many, right? There are several other huge billion-dollar fintech companies. Another one is social platforms. This is probably something you will be most familiar with. WeChat is far more than anything that the West offers. It's a complete integrated system where you can do anything from, I have it on the next slide, you can do anything from, you can do anything from ordering food to making doctor's appointments, to what I do on a monthly basis. I pay my electricity bills and my water bills through WeChat. When I go to the movies, I order the ticket through WeChat, and it's actually 50% cheaper than if I go to the actual cinema. So there's many innovative things here. You can even take loans on WeChat based on your social credit score that they will give you. I haven't done it so far, but if conditions are good, I might do it in the future. And actually, lots of people do it. And the other slide, the one on the right, the chart you will see, this is from 2016. It's maybe a little bit small, but it shows you kind of the revenue. So this is from the beginning of 2016, while WhatsApp and Facebook Messenger's revenue was basically zero, which is almost still the case. WeChat already had 1.8 billion, and now it has, it's a manifold of this. And also back then, WhatsApp and Facebook Messenger had almost no functionality except for sending messages and pictures, versus WeChat already had integrated advertising, commerce, online to offline services, and so on and so forth. So even back then it was already developed, and it has developed into a much bigger ecosystem now. This is the slide I just skipped. That's probably also surprising. When you think about electric cars, you mostly think about Tesla, you think about the US, probably you think about Germany, hopefully. What you see is that China is leading when it comes to electric cars as well. They now have they have sold more cars than the rest of the world combined in 2016. And they have over 70 different models. Tesla only has a market share of 2% versus 25 to 30% in Europe. And even percentage terms, many people say, well, China is big, has lots of people there, of course. In terms of quantity, it will always be number one. But even in terms of in percentage terms, it already outranks the US and Europe. So since this is a media and advertising conference, and by the way, these are just some areas I mentioned. There's also online gaming. There's environmental tech. I mean, if you look at solar and wind energy, many people think China is polluted. They don't do anything against pollution and these things. But in fact, China is already leading in these areas as well. And I'm also not a government official, so I don't just want to promote China. China is also, in many areas, it still hasn't reached US or European standards, such as ad tech, B2B in many areas. There are several areas where China is behind. But the common perception is just absolutely wrong that China is a copycat market and is not really innovating. And even in the media sector, or the kind of media advertising sector, many people think, well, China is suppressed, the government doesn't really allow anything, and so on and so forth. But even in that sector, even in the media sector, there's something going on. And I just want to mention a couple of examples. One is something that I would call the paid content platform revolution. And it's basically, it doesn't really exist here. So it's WeChat allows users to put up paywalls, and other platforms as well. WeChat is just the most famous one, but there are many, many other social platforms in China that have integrated paywalls. So if you are if you're a publisher and you have a public account, you don't have to adjust a paywall on your website. You can just do it within the platform itself, and the platform will protect you and will handle all the payment. And features that are actually widely used in China already are also rewarding people for good content. So if you look at most social platforms such as Douban or Zhihu, which would probably be equivalent to Quora or big forums, you can reward people for good content. So underneath each content, there will be a button where you can give people €1, 20 cents, 30 cents, and it's widely used. And why is it widely used? It's because it's so easy to pay people for good content. It's all integrated in the platform. So you can just, by clicking the button, you don't have to get out your credit card, you don't have to get out your PayPal account, you don't have to type anything in. It just allows you to reward people, and that's why it's widely used. And it goes even further, and I know in the West this exists as well. There are these big expert networks where you can basically pay experts for their advice. And in China, it goes further. You can pay journalists for your advice. You can pay any kind of expert, and it's widely used. Versus in the US or Europe, it's still kind of a niche product. Then there's something else in the media landscape which I see is that the complete personalization of the content landscape. So we know that Facebook already runs their newsfeed by recommendation algorithm. But in China, if you open any app, any website, it will all be completely personalized by recommendation algorithms. And I guess that's also kind of what the user behavior of the future is. They don't want something that, I mean, if you talk about serious news, of course, it's different. But if you talk about the vast amount of apps, including entertainment apps, entertainment content apps, the future user behavior will be that they want something completely personalized. And in China, that's already the case. So any app you open, the largest news apps, even the smallest news apps will be personalized and run by recommendation algorithms. Another one is connecting social, live video, and commerce. Again, this also exists in the West, but the extent and the level of detail it has reached in China goes much beyond what's happening here. Around 400 million users watch live streaming daily in China. That's around 55% of internet users, depending on the statistics you look at. And there are actually tens of billion-dollar companies just doing live streaming. You've probably never heard of these companies. Panda TV, Momo, just went to NASDAQ. These are huge companies just doing live streaming. And what do users do on these apps? I mean, they watch reality shows. I guess what's most common in the West is still gaming content. But if you look at China, it's really popular to watch reality live shows. And it's growing, and this is probably also the fastest growing segment. And even Weibo, where many people say, okay, Weibo is just the same thing as Twitter, had its best year while Twitter is declining, and the reason is just live streaming, because live streaming is so popular and has reached such a scale. And then there's a huge potential, and that's something that's a new trend coming up as well, connecting live streaming and e-commerce. And you see some companies such as Alibaba or other kind of e-commerce players, they report conversion rates up to 34-35%. Lastly, something that we do, to do a little advertising at the end. So I came to China around 3 years ago, and then I started a content marketplace. What it is in China there are 50 million 50 million small and medium-sized brands that have a sizable budget to spend, and there are around 150,000 registered advertising agencies, and millions of influencers, millions of content creators, and the market is completely chaotic. So at this point, if you want to do an advertising as a small or medium-sized brand, you can't find anybody. People are afraid that they will be cheated. It's difficult to know who's the right advertiser for you. And we will connect all these people, and we will offer them standardized processes. We offer them data analytics. We offer them matching through algorithms. And we try to organize that whole market. I know some of the points I mentioned are quite broad. And this is also because what I'm hoping is that I'm just giving you food for thought. So if you look for true innovation, you should go online. You should kind of Google these things, find out more about them. Because it really matters that you look in detail how Twitter is different from Weibo, how Alibaba is different from Amazon, or how WeChat is different from WhatsApp. And then you can really learn something about the user behavior of the future. Because one thing you can see in China is that, and that's also why China, I guess, is an important place to look at. If you look at all the developed or developing countries, China is already on the top of the curve. So China is fairly developed. The user behavior is very different. Everything is mobile, everything is in platforms, and I guess that will be similar here. And you can already see that it's going towards that direction, but it will probably still take a decade until it reaches levels of China. And by then, China will be ahead again. So I urge you to understand all these areas and try to see how these companies work, and I think then you can also learn something for your organization. To sum it up, I think it matters as much as what happens in China as what happens in Silicon Valley. And I think a lot of the big US companies, they already look to China. They look to what's WeChat doing, or even to what's in Korea, what's Line doing, what are all these companies doing. And I guess even for your organization, if you're a media and advertising company, you should be looking to China. Thank you very much.
Fabian, we have just a minute for questions, if that's
Sure.
okay?
Yeah, that's fine.
And I guess the first one from me, absolutely fascinating. Do you think that large Chinese media organizations like the ones you've described are content with the Chinese-speaking market? Or should we prepare for some of these brands that we're less aware of in the West to expand internationally?
Well, there's a quite interesting argument about Chinese companies expanding abroad. If you think about in general, why are companies expanding abroad is usually to make money, right? To go to a different market and make money. But if you look at the Chinese market, and if you look at the numbers I just showed you, there's really no need for Chinese companies to expand abroad in terms of making more revenue or getting bigger market share. So I guess the only 3 reasons or 2 reasons Chinese companies would expand is technology transfer. So they want to learn.
Yeah.
And another one is they would take products that already exist in the West, kind of probably acquire them and bring them home to their local market. So it's probably a different philosophy than what you've seen from the US. You see Alibaba and these companies expanding here, but I don't think they're looking for huge revenue growth, because the market potential in China in terms of middle class growth as well as internet user growth is so big that it doesn't make sense to expand too much.
Fabian, thank you. If we have one more question, we might be able to take it. Yes, there's a gentleman over there. We'll take that one first.
Sure.
No, microphone's coming, I think, I hope. No, it's a long way away.
Oh yeah, I can hear you, it's okay.
So if you didn't hear that, what's the biggest cultural challenge if you go from Germany to Shanghai? Better keep this fairly brief, because I'm not sure we can give cultural advice.
I guess like lots of things, so I actually can't keep it brief, but I will try to. I mean, language, I think one thing that kind of shocks you is the level of education. So it's a developing country. You think Shanghai is very modern, and it's far more modern than many cities around the world, but the education level and the kind of knowledge of people is like still behind the West. So that's something that once you get to China more and once you kind of speak the language, you quickly realize that the education level still has a gap. But that will also develop over time.
I know we have one more question, but if you could, well, we're going to have to stop for time, I'm afraid. If you could ask it afterwards, that would be great.
Sure.
Okay, we're going to break now for 5 minutes and reassemble at 3 o'clock. Can I ask you first to thank Fabian? Thank you.